downtown Decatur. It's the Faber Files. Hello, I'm your host, Bill Faber. Because democracy demands debate, we present this program of public issues and public interests. Nowhere else on broadcast TV do you see an extended interview with people of our community and people talking about issues that are central to our community. This evening's guest is Professor Kent Redfield, Professor of Political Science at the University of Illinois at Springfield. Professor Kent Redfield discusses the problems of politics in Illinois. You know, a comment before we begin listening to Professor Redfield is this, that a democracy and a republic in particular, like the United States, can only succeed if its citizens are involved and informed. Without the involvement, the effort, and the energies of a citizen, a democracy and a republic are doomed to fail. The statistics are in from our most recent election. Nationwide, we had the lowest historic turnout for voters since 1942. The percentage turnout was only 29% of eligible registered voters. America, we've got some work to do and some problems to solve. This evening, Professor Redfield will talk about some of those solutions. Thanks for watching.
He has research appointments with the Center for State Policy and Leadership at UIS and at the University of Illinois Institute of Government and Public Affairs. Dr. Redfield has his PhD in political science from the University of Washington in Seattle. Prior to joining UIS in 1979, Dr. Redfield worked for 4 years as a member of the research appropriations staff for the Speaker of the Illinois General Assembly. His primary assignment with the legislature was staffing the House's local government committees. Dr. Redfield's research and teaching interests are primary areas of money and politics in Illinois politics, local government. Between 1979 and 1999, he served as the program coordinator for the Illinois General Assembly's Legislative Staff Intern Program. He has done quite a bit more. I will skip to the fact that he has authored a number of books, and of course you can Google all that. And his most recently, he wrote a chapter on Illinois elections in Illinois politics, a citizen's guide, which was published in 2010, and a chapter on congressional redistricting. Many of you signed petitions for that this last term. It would be interesting to find out how that happened. And in the book, The Political Battle Over Congressional Redistricting, which came out in 2013. So we're really pleased to have Dr. Kent Redfield with us today.
How are we in terms of sound?
We'll find out.
Good.
Okay. That's good. Okay. Hopefully that doesn't overdo it. I'm pleased to be here. I'm happy that to accept the invitation. And people that know me know that I love to talk politics, and having a new audience that hasn't heard my old material is always a welcome opportunity. We should point out that while I did work for the Speaker of the House at that time was Bill Redmond. Mike Madigan was the assistant majority leader when I worked for the legislature. Dan Walker was governor, and Jerry Ford was president when I started. So it was a long time ago. So I want you to put that in a little bit of context. I'm going to talk about politics and the nature of politics and getting engaged in politics, as a companion to talking about fixing the problems that we have in Illinois and the challenges that face us with a new governor and an old new legislature still dominated by the Democrats. So it is clear that Illinois has horrendous problems. It's clear that we have a politics that does not serve us very well most of the time in addressing those problems. We just went through, and I'm really happy to talk about the details of politics and what went on in the election on Tuesday and all of that. But you're going to have to come back after the break to ask me questions about that. I'm not going to give you a rerun of the whole election. I would point out that the two candidates for governor spent about $80 million in this race, about 100 overall, and locally, the race between Linda Little and Annie Menard, they will spend about $2.2 million on that seat. And the race between Sue Shear and Mike Bell, that was about $1,270,000. Illinois politics is incredibly expensive where there are contests. On the other hand, out of 118 seats that were up, only 47 of them were contested. Only 47 of them had a Democrat and a Republican on the ballot where voters had a choice. We have developed an interesting politics, and we'll talk a little bit about redistricting in the context of what I'm going to say. I need to watch my time here. So as I said, horrendous problems. Sluggish economy, budget crisis, pension crisis, unmet needs in social services, education, infrastructure. Government, in terms of the way it's managed in Illinois, is a mess in terms of, if you look at it from a public administration kind of perspective, and the people that provide the services. The governor-elect said, and I take him at his word, that he wants a compassionate, competitive state. He wants government to function. He wants quality schools. And yet, I have a daughter and a son-in-law who are teachers. I work in a university. I have lots of friends in state agencies. Most of the people that work for the state of Illinois or teach in schools came out of this campaign feeling threatened, disrespected. And these are the people that we are going to have to rely on to provide those services that we expect the state to deliver. So there's a huge task in terms of rebuilding the confidence and the competency of the people that work for the state of Illinois. So these are amazing problems. And we have a politics that does not, it doesn't focus on the public good. That isn't the default position of Illinois politics. Illinois politics is about power and winning and control. It's a very pragmatic, non-ideological, ethics-free kind of politics. When I worked for the legislature, I was involved with negotiations involving tax increment financing. And I was in a meeting and people were discussing the issues, and a lobbyist who was a former city council member from, I believe it was Peoria, was part of the discussion. And someone talked about the public interest and good government. And he leaned across the table and he said, "Sir, where I come from, good government is 6 votes on a Tuesday night. Because the city council meets on Tuesday, it's a 10-member city council. If you've got 6 votes, you've got good government." That's a power, winning, control kind of approach to politics that really says there isn't a public good other than just aggregating individual self-interest. So, you know, fixing Illinois politics is a huge task that has to go hand in hand with fixing Illinois government. Now, you know, I'm sure there are some here who think that the title should not be fixing politics, the title should be getting rid of politics. And I think that's a serious question. I think that's something, you know, that we need to, you know, that needs to be addressed right off the top. Finish the sentence in your head. Politics is. What is politics? At least some of you thought something along the line, politics is a dirty business. Politics is a business. Politics is a dirty business. There's an old joke about these two politicians, two legislators that are outside the legislative chamber and they're arguing, and the first one says, "You're lying." And the second one says, "Yes, I am, but hear me out." So, is politics inherently a dirty business where dishonesty is routinely accepted and expected? What is the nature of politics? I happen to be a golfer, and so I'm going to tell you a golfing story. While on vacation in Scotland, a guy decides to play on one of those links courses. They're incredibly difficult. You know, rough and the gorse and the pot bunkers and all of those things. And he hires a veteran caddy to go out and play golf. And he gets on the first tee. His drive goes out into the rough. He loses his ball. He's in the rough. He's out of the rough. He gets in front of the green. He's in a pot bunker. It takes 3 strokes to get out. He gets 3 putts when he's on the green. He's got a 12 on a par 4. And he and the caddy are walking to the next tee, and he turns to this grizzly old caddy next to him and he says, "Funny game, golf." And the caddy looks back at him and says, "'Tain't meant to be." Okay, golf is and is. It's, you know, how well you play the game is a function of the design of the course, the skill and temperament of the golfer. There's nothing inherently evil or even unpleasant about golf. And most importantly, you can't play golf without playing golf. You know, it's an is. Well, politics is an is. You know, politics is a dirty business, may be an accurate description about how politics is played part of the time, or maybe most of the time. But in the words of the caddy, our caddy friend here, "'tain't meant to be." You know, there is nothing inherently evil, dishonest, unethical about politics. Politics is the process through which societies as a whole make collective decisions about governance. In the American political system, those decisions are made by the actions of voters and legislators and chief executives. And where you have action, you have interaction, and when you have interaction, you have influence. You know, the right to influence government is part of the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, petitioning government for redress of grievances. You know, the alternatives are, you know, a market-based decision-making, I guess. We could have tyrants. You know, there are other ways to design and operate a political system. But this is how we make collective decisions in the American political system, is through action. You know, it's not the best science wins. I get terribly frustrated about political reform, and that's what I work on a lot. And some of you may be involved with environmental issues. You get terribly frustrated about, you know, where's the public good? How come science isn't, you know, the predominant force that's making decisions? But, you know, that's not the way we make decisions in terms of of the political system. We make decisions on the basis of action, of voting, of roll calls in legislatures, of executive decisions. That, and we just heard, declaration, or there was a preamble, I'm sorry. On the Declaration of Independence, we all know about that men are endowed with certain inalienable rights, that among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. What's the next sentence? To secure those rights, governments are instituted among men, driving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That's the struggle, that's the task, in terms of a political system, is how do we take the consent of the governed? How do we get public opinion and express it in terms of collective action in a way that people accept it as legitimate, accept it as they are being represented, and that they may not like the outcome, but the outcomes are legitimate. That's really the challenge at this point. We have horrendous problems in the state. We're going to ask everybody in this room, I think, to sacrifice in one way or another if we're really going to address the problems that the state has in terms of meeting its basic civic responsibilities. But we don't have a politics that creates that trust and that legitimacy, that people feel like they're, that they are granted consent and that they are engaged in, the process of producing results that are fair, that everything, things got there and got discussed, and and a decision got made that was the best that people could come up with at a particular time. So there's nothing inherently evil or unfair about politics. But there's also nothing in politics that makes it inherently wise or moral. You have to, the politics is no better than the people and the institutions and processes that we develop. We have a federal system, representative democracy within a constitutional framework and a Bill of Rights. That's a unique political system, unlike anything that existed prior to it coming into being. But it is a government. When the Founding Fathers met to write the Constitution after the failures of the Articles of Confederation, they did not form a non-for-profit corporation. They did not form a multinational corporation. They formed a government, a mechanism for translating public opinion, tempering it into collective action in ways that we can govern ourselves. This is I'm on my soapbox here, but this is a huge challenge, and if you don't accept what we do, the politics as being legitimate, and if you don't participate on the basis of those beliefs, then the system fails. We think people should participate in politics because it has an intrinsic value. That's very Aristotelian, that you can't be a complete person unless you're engaged in the civic part of life. And I believe that's true. I think there is an there's an intrinsic value in participating in politics. But there's also an instrumental value in participating in politics. If people don't participate at a certain level, then the process becomes distorted. It gets run by other people in the absence of full participation or a level of participation that makes the system work and gets public opinion into the process and provides the kind of controls and restraints and shaping that is necessary to produce policies, to produce outcomes that people accept as legitimate. So this reconnecting is, it is the most difficult thing. We have huge corruption problems in Illinois that involve bad apples, bad people doing bad things. And we can fix those to a certain extent. We've actually done a pretty good job of hardening the target, of making it more difficult to be corrupt and more likely that you'll get caught if you are corrupt. Okay, I've worked on these issues for 25 years now. We're much better than we used to be. But, think about banks. Think about robbing banks. Okay. Banks have guards. Banks have security cameras. And people know that when they think about robbing a bank, they know there's a risk factor there that, they can get caught. But most people don't rob banks because they think they're afraid they're going to get caught. Most people don't rob banks because they think it's wrong. They have an internalized set of values about honesty that say, it's wrong to rob banks. So we can make it more difficult for politicians to be corrupt, for public officials, for agency people to be corrupt. But if we have a culture that is a wink and a nod and says, well, if you're an elected official, you get a certain amount of perks. You get a different set of standards. You get a little bit of slack. If you've got those kinds of attitudes, then you're never going to, if you don't internalize attitudes that say, politics should be about the public good, that we should be ethical, that it's about, and it's also about appearances. We want to have a politics in which not only that people are acting ethically, but people believe they're acting ethically. The appearance of corruption is just as corrosive as corruption. If everybody thinks the system is fixed, if everybody thinks that they can't get a fair shot, then they don't participate, they don't get engaged. It doesn't really matter what reality is. It's about actual behavior, but it's also about perception. Now, this is hard. And we just talked about one type of corruption. There's another type of corruption that you have to address. Bribery and extortion, the former governor trying to sell the U.S. Senate seat. That's pretty, everybody kind of knows that's wrong. They see that and they say, and that's also kind of the ultimate kind of corruption in Illinois politics from one perspective is, the governor saying, I got this and I'm not giving it away for nothing. I mean, he embellished it a little bit with some colorful language, but that was the sentiment. And that's a sense of entitlement, that I should get something out of it. Where's mine? Okay, that's a very, that does terrible damage to our politics and our ability to fix problems. But there's another corruption, which is the systemic corruption of political institutions. Anytime you do things that tend to distort the basic principles of political institutions, then that is corrupted, whether it is illegal or not. The way that you and I are probably, if you are all, depending on where you live in Decatur, we're probably we probably live in the same legislative district, the 96th House District. Sue Shear would be the rep that was just elected. Okay, I live on the east, next to the lake in Springfield. That district runs from the state capitol and the medical center in Springfield all the way. I just drove through it to get here. And it encumbers most of Decatur, except for the areas kind of, I think, the other side of the lake that would be more affluent / Republican areas who now have a state senator who, I think that Senate district goes all the way to Indiana. Okay, the legislative district I live in makes no sense at all, other than it was designed to elect a Democrat. There's no community of interest to represent. It's very difficult for the members of that district to communicate with their legislator. It's very difficult for the legislator to know what the district wants. We take, and representation is about communication both ways, between constituents and between legislators, about understandings, about problems, and an ability to kind of know and accept each other and talk about what are the problems and the state has in general, and how does that make sense in terms of a legislative district. You can't do that in lots of legislative districts in Illinois. They are fictions. And so the way we do redistricting serves whatever political party controls the process, but it corrupts the process of representation. The same thing is true for voting, for election law in Illinois. I mean, by definition, election law is the law. You can't be illegal because it is the law. But we systematically make it more difficult for people to participate as voters, as candidates and as third parties. Make it more difficult, more difficult than it should be for people to participate as voters in the process. Our laws corrupt the institution of elections, and that's the more that's a part of corruption that's very difficult to get at, because the laws are designed to benefit the people in power. These are difficult, really, really difficult questions. I got a lot more questions than answers. Because, how do you get people engaged in an age that one person has characterized the problem as attention deficit democracy? Not everybody has the time and the energy to engage in politics. And it's more and more difficult now than it's probably ever been. And yet, the system doesn't work if you don't have people's attention and if they don't bring a certain amount of energy that allows the system to work. And, political ethics is not easy when you apply it to a specific case. Okay, conflicts of interest, they exist. There it is. If I'm an insurance executive and I am a member of the General Assembly and I have a bill that affects the insurance industry, I have a conflict of interest. That's inherent. It comes out of the situation. I can act ethically or unethically in relation to that conflict of interest. But however I act won't make it go away. It's there. And, let's talk about something very specific that's probably going to come up.